So I have this image of you in the middle of the Namibian desert in your dune buggy control booth while this enormous chase scene is underway. And what goes by very fast on film took a long time. And I want you to sort of describe for me a typical, like, or maybe even the worst day in that process of shooting that scene. What it was like for you.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, you bring back sort of feelings that I won't say post-traumatic stress, but putting my mind back there, there's a kind of demented pleasure in it. And not a day goes by when you don't think to yourself, wow, I think I'm crazy. I must say it's really interesting because when you're shooting one of those movies, you're often, as you say, moving along in a vehicle, and in amongst it. It's not being a green screen movie. You're not sitting in a chair, and if you look at directors, if you look at pictures of those wonderful old black and white pictures of directors, they're sitting in the classic director's chair, and they're in a state of repose. They're almost mimicking the state of the audience, because we sit in a movie theatre like this, and so there's not a lot happening to you, and you're basically being invited into the experience of the screen, and that just can't happen out there in the wasteland when you're shooting it for real. So there was a lot of adrenaline. For me, when we were doing stunts, there was a lot of anxiety because we really, really prepared. But when you're shooting for 138 days and fatigue is setting in, and you're in a remote location, one thing going wrong could be disastrous. And often things go wrong when your guard is down. The big stunts, everyone puts so much effort into, but it's often the small things that can catch you out. So there's always that underlying anxiety and the relief when we got through something and it was there in the camera, in the camera, and everyone was fine and everyone was safe, because we had cast doing stunts. We had a lot of stunt performers also as cast, and so there was never that moment of repose, and there was always that feeling of it was pretty wild. I mean, particularly. Sorry.
Well, I love the idea that 35 years after you did the first one, you may be an older guy, but you're also someone who has all the skills and knowledge and experience of those 35 years added to what you didn't know on your first movie.
Yes.
to what you know now.
Yes,
and I have this image of you sort of manipulating these multiple cameras and these stunts, the wires, the people on the weighted poles flying, that you had to keep track of all of that. I mean, I'm trying to imagine that moment, that day, when it was just at the height of its intensity.
Well, remember, the great thing about this is I had a really, really good crew. Guy Norris, who was the stunt coordinator, and
on the first movie too, right?
He was a stuntman. He was barely 20. I think he was just past 20 when he was on the second Mad Max, and he was a young stuntman. He wasn't the stunt coordinator, but he'd done a lot of movies in the meantime. And we had also a fantastic rigging crew who had done the Sydney Olympics, those big opening ceremonies where they only get one take, and the Beijing Olympics, and several other, I think, part of the Vancouver Olympics. And anyway, so we had really, really good crew, and they had the key to it all is to prepare it really, really well. But the worst days,
because it was hot too, right?
It was we started shooting in the winter, very cold in the morning. So, but by the time it got to mid-morning, the heat would start to come in, and by noon it was very, very hot and very, very dusty. I'm just trying to think of a worse day.